sleep, and I shall soothe you, calm you, and anoint you, myrrh for your hot forehead. Oh, then you'll feel everything's all right. Yes, everything's fine, and it's cool, and the ointment's sweet. For the fire in your head and feet. Close your eyes. God damn it. Close your eyes and relax. Think of nothing tonight. Everything's all right. Yes. Right, yes. Everything's all right.
Woman,
yes.
your fine ointment, brand new and expensive, should have been saved for the poor. Why has it been wasted? We could have raised maybe 300 silver or more. People who are hungry, people who are starving, they matter more than your feet and hair. Not as
Yeah. It was funky.
It's not as funky as I feel in my heart, you know? You ever have that?
I know. Well, I just started singing lessons, and I think I'm at the unfortunate uncanny valley where I just barely know enough to now understand the true depth of what bad singers we are.
That's fine.
This time was extra rough.
Well,
and we just saw this. Where do we see it? Was it Pantages? Somewhere in LA. Jesus Christ Superstar, of course.
I think it was the Pantages.
Is to what I refer. Yeah. And I got to say, you and I both have a long childhood history of not liking this song as much, but that show really turned me around. They just nailed it. It was
an amazing rendition.
Really great.
The King Herod
production.
I would look at what was like the 40th anniversary, 50th anniversary, something like that. Look up the
something
King
like
Herod
that.
costume
that's
from
what
this
they just did.
It's wild.
Dynamite. So I hope we did it justice.
We didn't. But also, I have like a pulled.
Yeah,
I have a herniated disc in my neck, and it's acting up today. I'm gonna blame that on my lackluster performance.
My dog is sick.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if that.
No.
Can we factor that in as well? Yeah.
That's it's kind of a love song.
All right, but this is Science or Whatever, the podcast where we slowly work our way through a rendition of Jesus Christ Superstar, one block at an excruciating block at a time. And I'm one of your hosts, Michael Swaim. Who's here with me?
Griffin Rowell.
That's right. And this is Science or Whatever, and this is specifically the Metaverse part of Science or Whatever, and this is specifically part 3 of the Metaverse part of Science or Whatever. And I need to point out right off the bat, and then I will cede most of my time to Griffin, who's here to tell us all about the metaverse and related technologies. But I just, as a good podcaster, have to point out we lied to you in several regards. Previously, we said we would be recording this episode from within a functioning metaverse. Not true. You're just listening to it the regular old way with your ears. And we said there will be 4. We now don't know. Is this right? We don't know how many there will be. There will be however many we need to get to the end.
I think so. Well, no. I think it'll be. Well, total? I think it'll be 4. I have 11 pages of notes, so we'll see. I think the first episode was like 3 pages of notes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
We'll you meant 11 pages of notes total. I thought you meant for this episode. Woof. All right.
Yeah. No. I mean,
but much like all these technologies, the metaverse, Griffin did. I don't want to throw you completely under the virtual bus. Griffin made a metaverse for me. My computer can run it okay, and it's no shade at throwing at Griffin, but like it's fine. It's nothing spectacular to like look at. So we decided to just do a regular audio episode.
Yeah,
but
no, it's
we could talk about what went into it.
It does have a herd of photogrammetric brachiosauruses, but
that's the main thing I wanted to bring up is in this metaverse, and just to explain to a layman what I mean is a web browser link that Griffin sent me, and I click on it, and I'm in a little virtual room, and I can turn around by clicking and dragging. I can look around, and there's stuff he put in there, and he's a freaking nerd, so it's like a space capsule and a dinosaur. But then explain what you mean about the brachiosaurs. How'd you get the brachiosaur model in there? Because I think that's an interesting technological tidbit.
Oh. Yeah, no, my kids have a giant Jurassic World Brachiosaurus, like 3 feet tall. Super cool. But I put it on my kitchen island, and I took, I think, like 240 pictures of it, like rocking around in a circle at 3 different elevation levels. So like straight on, and then one below, and then one above. And there's this software called Mushroom you can use where it basically stitches together all of the pictures and makes a point cloud, and then creates a 3D model out of that. And then, yeah, I have a 3D model of this actual toy dinosaur, but the head is too small. So basically, it looks like a few triangles in the shape of a head. It doesn't actually quite look like a perfect recreation of the
Everyone's
Brachiosaurus.
trying their best, and that includes the people working on the photogrammetric software. All right, let's get into format.
Oh, no, Mushroom's awesome. My dad does it. My dad can actually do it really well, but yeah, I
don't mean to denigrate the fine work of, what is it, Mushroom? Okay.
No, yeah, Mushroom. It's amazing.
I'm sure it is.
It's amazing.
Explain that and even more as we get into format. What are we talking about today as it pertains to the Metaverse, Griffin?
So the last couple times we talked about, okay, what is the Metaverse? And we talked about what existing companies are going to be doing. Today, we get into the, I will be honest, the heavily biased explanation of kind of the indie metaverse, the decentralized metaverse, the thing that I think everyone wants to see rather than Facebook. But I won't lie, this is just propaganda.
Well, because just to recap, you ended last episode by sort of saying that this is in part a call to action because the metaverse doesn't exist yet, or at least the strictures that define it aren't fully realized, and you have a stance on how you'd like it to be, like it to take shape. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's the difference between basically what we've had for the past 20 years or figuring out how we can go in different directions that are hopefully more equitable and, respectful of people's privacy, and fix all the mistakes that we've had to live with when we decided that selling ourselves to corporations was a great idea. So, it basically what we have here is we have Meta. They're building, Facebook. They're building this metaverse thing. It's called Horizons right now. Have you used it? Have you gone in Quest and like Oculus Quest and done any?
This is how dumb I am. I don't think so, but maybe. All I've done is sign into my Quest, and then I'm in a virtual space, and I use that to access my games, and it has a theater and it has a social component. But that's not the metaverse. I know it's not, and I hear you sneering at me. What has Meta put into it?
Oh, they've got this thing called Horizons, which is basically like the Facebook version of it's the thing that they're basing their whole metaverse play on. So it's got like some user generated content tools, and you can be these like goofy looking half bodied avatars and play ping pong or whatever. Super clean and nice and corporate. So that's what you would expect from a company constantly just fighting PR disaster after PR disaster.
I can say from working within the video games journalism field now that the Quest 2 was wildly successful in large part because it somehow they're able to manufacture them at scale and get them to people. So it's one of the gaming things that is like at a good price point and people can actually get their hands on for the most part. So I do think the Quest 2 was like a big seller this holiday season, and I'm looking at Horizon Worlds now. Yeah. It looks, like you said, clean and cheerful and colorful.
Right. It's like the Wii version of the metaverse, And yeah, so that will be appealing to people. It's gonna have some utility. People will have fun with it. I'm sure that Mark Zuckerberg said they're gonna have marketplaces, and people will use it the same way they use Facebook. But everything that exists in Horizons and whatever following products
Mhm.
Meta comes out with are likely to be closed, meaning Meta will own that the same way they own everything on Facebook, right? Like you can put whatever you want on there, but as soon as it's on the platform, basically you're just giving away all your rights to it. And while that might be okay for content creators because they're going to have a low commission rate and stuff, the things you buy, digital products that you buy, they might not really, Meta won't have it in their interest really to make it work with other platforms. And we're going to get into that. The entire next episode is about how the metaverse will be stitched together from all these different technologies. But basically what that means is there will be no interoperability or content portability, likely. They have talked about doing some experimentation with NFTs and stuff, but we'll see what that means, and their approach to it will likely be very different from the people who we're talking about today.
But my newfound understanding of the blockchain as a series of nested, basically contractual transactions, that is the kind of thing that would fuel the ability to keep ownership in the hands of content creators, right? Like that's how you would track all that. In theory.
Yes. And so that it gives ownership, but the actual use of those objects, like if I buy a jacket in real life, right? No one can tell me, and we're going to get into this much more, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but no one can tell me I can only wear it in certain places. It's a thing that I own. If Meta sells you an NFT, they can certainly put licensing restrictions on it still, and they can create it in a way that it's just not that useful anywhere else, right? Like if they only want Meta specific wearables for avatars, for instance,
it vanishes when you leave their area.
Make it difficult.
Yeah. Okay, so it has kind of like a...
Well, it might not be. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that's what the Disney NFT experiences, at least for right now, that's what they sound like they're going to be. It'll be mainly like NFTs that work, that are like, you have the 3D model, but they only do stuff if you're in the Disney metaverse, right? Like, because they're saying they're having their own metaverse.
Right.
So... that's going to be a big difference between who we talked about yesterday and the people last time, and the people we're talking about today. And this is kind of the idea of the open metaverse. And the open metaverse is like a very romantic ideal of what this evolution of of what the internet basically is going to be, and really trying to double down on some of the earlier ideological hopes for the internet. And it's really interesting because the reason things didn't work last time is really just because of it's basically just the economic incentives of the people building the internet, right? At some point, it becomes detrimental to a corporation to be as open as even probably the people who started those corporations intended it to be. Just because at some point you have to look at a profit and loss statement and go, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't share everything that we do with everyone. And so that's where we are now. But the open metaverse is an idea that this convergence of technologies, NFTs and the spatial web and increased gamification, is really creating an environment where instead of companies trying to capture all of the value of the metaverse, like they did with social media, for instance, right, like Facebook, it may actually be such a giant opportunity that working together and making, the pieces of it interoperate and work outside of your own platform, it may be that we're in a time where those incentives are more aligned with kind of the ideals. we'll find out how this all plays out. And I think this is why I wanted to do the podcast and be here for everyone.
So the idea being like capitalism still holds sway and the metaverse is built upon or a reflection of that, or if you want to call it just the human nature to do incentivized behaviors and not do unincentivized behaviors. But it sounds to me like you're saying we may be reaching a point where these giant companies could make even more money if they share their toys a little bit, or if their toy is able to plug into so-and-so's toy. I don't mean to take everything down to the scale of toys, but that's like how it's starting.
No, I think that's actually, I think that's really like it's an interesting point, because ultimately they may not make as much money, but the alternative may be that they can't exist, right? If you hang on so tightly to these controls that corporations have traditionally had over their technology platforms, but the consumers see this world. It's almost like an authoritarian government in the real world at this point, right? Like
and especially look at the stories where. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you can.
Well, I was just going to say the stories we're already telling ourselves, as far as every story now is like a multiverse crossover super event. It feels like we demand that now. Like Spider-Man has to meet Batman, has to do, we want things to be stitched together. Everyone understands that brands own everything, but we want those brands to interconnect in a meaningful way.
I think so. I think with not just with the huge crossover events like Marvel and stuff like that, but with these, just look at the NFT industry right now. It's a very small industry, mostly amateur, but like the amount of content that is being created and the licensing that is being used, like Creative Commons licensing, commercial licenses for these NFTs, people are remixing this stuff, crossing over, adding utilities that work together in ways that just have not been possible before now. And you talked about capitalism still existing and using those incentives to make this open environment. But that's actually, there are, I would say that there are three communities that I can think of here in the open metaverse. There's the open metaverse that's kind of like traditional, more of like the Second Life open metaverse. Janus, the thing that I built, that the little world that we were I showed you.
Yeah.
That was from like 2016-ish. High Fidelity is another Philip Rosedale thing, the guy who made Second Life. And it's all been kind of, there's a lineage there. Then there's the crypto people. And the crypto people have taken some of those lessons, but have also kind of tried to reinvent the wheel a little bit. And they're very focused on these economic incentives around ownership to drive hype cycles and increase attention and kind of create these these fever pitch fear of the FOMO, the fear of missing out, that a lot of the traditional metaverse people don't like. They see it as kind of scammy or
unsustainable in the long term,
and unsustainable, right? A lot of these play to earn games, they're not sustainable economies. They're economies that are designed to last for maybe a couple years, and then profit.
Then everyone in the comments is spamming dead game, and then we move on to the next thing. Yeah,
right. And we're not there yet. I think Axie Infinity has some economic problems. Axie Infinity is like the OG super crazy crypto game that's caused like an entire industry to spawn. But so there are those are the two main factions. But then there's a third faction, which is the probably leaning more on the crypto side, and then also post-capitalism. So you've got this wing of people who are like, so there's the DAOs, the decentralized autonomous.
There has to at some point be a post-capitalism. I mean, it in the infinite nature of time. Yeah.
And so that's the outlook of this group is we live in a world where our perspective is scarcity, and especially in the digital world, scarcity is an artificial construct, right? Some
Right.
people argue that even scarcity in the real world is artificial because it's the perspective you use. I kind of disagree with that. But in the virtual world, scarcity is artificial because you can make as many, like the kind of the argument against NFTs, right? Like I can just right click this. Why would I spend $10,000 on it? And so they kind of take that approach of like, well, why not? Why is there an economy of the metaverse? Everything should be free and open and just built on each other. And I think that's like, I think that's a beautiful hope. And I'm not quite sure I believe that the psychology of humanity will be ready for that anytime soon, because it costs money to run servers, and people need to be rewarded
Still,
in some way for
People
their
still
time
feel
and
the way they
contribution.
feel about money. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but you know, I think working towards that is noble, and I think that the people who are working towards that will probably come up with many great innovations that will help usher these things in you know, and further that cause, even
Or
if we
be
don't get to the
subsumed by
ideal, right?
capitalism. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
let me ask you this real quick. If in your assessment, on the spectrum of using the internet as a guide, right? Because that is a place where we've clearly seen this like play out. Everyone remembers there were times where, what was it called? Net neutrality. That's what it was called.
Mhm.
Where we all rallied around the idea of the open versus the closed internet. On the spectrum of a completely closed authoritarian bullshit, like you got to pay to move along internet, to a free, open, impossibly utopian internet. What is the internet we have on a scale from like 1 to 10? In your opinion?
Wait, 10 being totally open?
10 being like what the dream of what the internet could have been, and
Yeah.
1 being the worst case scenario. What is the internet as I experience it today? Is it a 3?
Oh, you know, I actually think that it depends on how you use it, to be honest. I would actually maybe give it a 5 or a 6. And I'll tell you, and I actually, the reason why is because most of the internet is pretty free and open, I would say. Like if you use WordPress, or you know, you have your own hosted site, that's pretty self-sovereign, right? Like, I mean, you own those domains. You
All I'll say is, but there is an algorithm constantly working in the background to make sure you only see the types of content that please that algorithm. You know, there is
so yeah,
that aspect to it.
Yeah, so that's why I would say, actually, you know, maybe I'll put like maybe a 4 or a 5.
Aha, I talked
because
it down a notch.
well, so there are these tools that are, and I actually think that we're not going to get to a 9 or a 10, because I think a 10 means everyone is self-hosting their own websites, and in the future their own virtual worlds. And that means that they have to either have powerful enough computers and the technical know-how to do that hosting, which is just a huge...
Not everyone wants to even bother. Yeah.
Not everyone. I would say like 99.9% of people don't want to do that. Do you want to set up your own AWS instance and like host your own website and make sure it's staying up 24 hours a day? It's a horrible burden. And so that's why we have things like, so WordPress is great because it's open source. And if you want to,
right,
you can self-host a WordPress site. No one does that. They go to Bluehost or something like that, right?
And then what Facebook offered us all is, look, you don't have to know how the internet works. Fill out this short form and you'll have your own little web page, and it's called a Facebook.
Right. And then
so I just think, yeah, it's interesting to look. Right. It's interesting to look at the internet and think, okay, that's one way that the metaverse could go.
It is. And that's why we're having this conversation publicly. And that's why Twitter is full of fights about the metaverse, and people are on Discord talking about this way more than is probably mentally healthy, because it means a lot to people. I think everyone would, you know, the people that I I'm hanging out with on Discord, a lot of them are on the 9 or 10 spectrum. They're like, no, I want to make my own virtual world because it's fun. I'm a maker. I'm going to 3D model this thing, set it up exactly the way I want, and invite my friends over to it. That's the most important thing. It's a real extension of me. But they are, that's a super minority. And I think the ultimate path forward is for people with that interest to create the tools that will allow, normies to make their worlds and express themselves without the horrible burden of knowing how photogrammetry and and volumetric capture,
how to build
3D
something
modeling.
from scratch.
Yeah, it's like it's a very high technical hurdle. So that's where we are right now. And I think through that process of making those tools, the ideal that I would say we should shoot for in the medium term is probably like a 7 on the openness scale. And then maybe if the people who have their dream of post-capitalism can figure out ways so that everyone can host their own world and we can all actually have decentralized hosting and share that hosting burden with each other across every machine, then we could start moving into the 9 or 10 openness. But right now, I don't think anyone actually wants that level of openness, to be honest. And there was an article by the founder of Signal, like the encrypted, he's a cryptographer. He did the,
right.
Yeah, Signal, the messaging app. Basically, that was his main point, is like, you all talk about all this freedom and, the NFTs are going to save us. But in the end, no one actually wants ownership of their stuff. They want to know that they can control their stuff. But if they have to do any work to host or maintain a presence, like that just basically wipes out the entire customer base.
Like you said, 99% of the people. Yeah,
no one will waste their time. So, and I can tell you the tools.
Yeah, it's hard enough just leading my life and dealing with my sick dog and shit. Yeah,
yeah. So, like we did last time, it's probably worth talking about some of the more notable things out there right now. And I think starting with the crypto platforms, there are a couple that stand out, and they have huge hype. They're getting so much money from venture capitalists, and it's really interesting right now because, as far as I can tell, they don't actually have that many players, right? Like it's like, what if someone made World of Warcraft and no one came? But it seems to be.
But all the angel investment is still there.
Yeah,
all the money's in place, and everyone's waiting for the party to start.
Right. So it's like some of this stuff is like, oh no, we're building World of Warcraft for 5 years from now, and we're gonna spend, $80 million, $90 million to prop it up until the world's ready for it. So we'll see if that happens. But the biggest platforms in my mind are Decentraland, which is probably the most famous, and also I would say probably the least useful at this point. Cryptovoxels, and then there are other ones like Somnium Space, which is mainly focused on NFT galleries, but I think we'll talk a little bit more. They have some really cool stuff that they're doing. And there's this thing called the Sandbox, which is the hot young thing. It's kind of like a Roblox, but it's crypto, and it's all web-based, or at least you can get to some of the experiences through the web. I think they might have a native client for the actual building part, but those are the big ones. So let's start with Decentraland. Decentraland, I think, started out 2017, 2016, and it was the actual project that it was someone set up a group of pixels and said, these pixels are parcels of land, and I'm going to use Ethereum smart contracts to sell these parcels of land to you. Give me money. And they did that. It was very successful.
And I'll use them.
What's that?
Was the promise that I'll use the money to develop, like right now it's just a pixel, but you'll own it forever and it will become something more? Or is it will always be a pixel? Fuck you, give me the money.
I think that they always did have a plan, like a roadmap to get from there to here. So they
Right.
did that. Then they did an ICO during an initial coin offering. It was like I don't know if you remember this, but there was like an
Is that the
ICO
equivalent
bubble.
of like, okay, like when Bitcoin is first offered, that's an ICO.
So
Starting today, you can buy
Bitcoin is not a
Bitcoin
good
or whatever.
example, but
Okay.
on Ethereum, you can make your own cryptocurrency, like based on
Ah,
Ethereum, called an ERC-20, and you basically just like mint all of the currency at once, and then you can like distribute. You can sell it and
but
distribute it out
okay.
however you want.
So I'm right in assuming it's the crypto equivalent of an IPO, right?
Yes, it is exactly
Okay.
the crypto equivalent of an IPO. There was a bubble in like 2017. A bunch of people got scammed. The SEC said, "What's happening now?" And now it's very difficult to do. So, but Decentraland was one of the big winners in that. I think they got like $20 million or something.
Mm-hmm.
So from then to now, they started building this web-based virtual world engine based on Unity, which is probably the main competitor to Unreal Engine, and it's the thing that all of the it's the engine that most of the web platforms use.
Yeah.
Okay,
And a lot of modern video games more and more
right
as well. Yeah.
So it's pretty much all of the metaverse platforms are built on this, which means they all have similar restrictions and advantages in the graphics and things like that. Decentraland's not super good looking, I'll say. It is the most.
That's another fascinating aspect to me, is that they all have a unique art style, and art, you know what I mean? Visual style itself is an individual form of creative expression of like your own identity. It's weird to think that some team of artists will get paid to design what the universe will look like, or like what is the art style we will settle on for. Well, that's the metaverse. It looks like this. So fascinating to me.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next episode with interoperability, but it's a super good question, and I hope the answer, and it's up to everyone building in the metaverse to make sure this happens. But I think the answer should be, there is no answer. It's just dependent on where you go. It should be open, and that's one of the big difficulties is how do you go from a photorealistic whatever place,
neighborhood, or whatever we call it,
to like the Salvador Dali world, right, where everything's melting and like what happens? Does your avatar change? Can it change? How do you do that kind of stuff? So these are super difficult questions that no one has answers to right now. Decentraland, Decentraland is like the origin of the land rush, the scarce land NFT. I should explain this, shouldn't I? So a lot of these metaverse platforms, I told you that Decentraland sold a pixel and said this is land in Decentraland. What that means is they make it a limited resource. So unlike Facebook, I can't just go to Decentraland and create a world, plop it down, and invite my friends to it. I have to have an actual, quote unquote, physical location within Decentraland, and I build my experience on it, and then people can see it when they're walking around Decentraland. CryptoVoxels is another one who's done this, and basically what it means is like when they sell these things, there's no control over who's buying it. So I can be the most cynical person in the world, buy a bunch of land in Decentraland, expect it to become scarce and there's demand for it, and then it'll go up super high in value, but I have no intention of actually doing anything to make Decentraland better. So but what happened is Decentraland is basically just like empty plots of land, pretty much, of these people who were just holding on parcels with no intention of doing anything fun in it. So it's kind of a wasteland. By
the way, it's cell shaded.
Yeah, well, it's vertex coloring. So,
Okay,
and that's
gotcha.
one of the things about Unity actually that is is difficult. Is there are some limitations because Unity's a one-stop tool, and it's mainly a game tool, right? Which kind of uses
Right.
native clients. So some of the features of Unity are a little bit muted when it's on the web, and we'll talk a little bit more about one solution later on, but that's potentially an opportunity for other people to do more native web tools. Decentraland is it's based on this thing called Mana. That's their cryptocurrency that they use. You buy stuff in the game with it, and really all of these mechanics with the scarce land and having to buy things with their specific cryptocurrency means that they have strong control over the narrative of like what Decentraland is, but it also means like 13,000 people use it a day, which is incredibly small. And I
Right.
think the prices of Decentraland is like 3 ETH right now, which Ethereum's kind of tanked lately, but that's like $10,000. It's an insane amount of money for anyone who's not just crypto rich and wants to
Right.
own a piece of Decentraland. So then there's Crypto Voxels, kind of a similar story. It's in voxel art, but it's a little bit cheaper, and they have a much more open policy. Decentraland, you have avatars that you build inside Decentraland. The wearables, so avatars have wearables, like you can buy hats and sunglasses and stuff. All of that stuff exists within Decentraland. None of it's going anywhere. Decentraland's kind of like, even though it's crypto, I would say it's the most closed crypto world. It does a lot of good stuff with open source. They give Blender, the 3D modeling software, a lot of money. They do good stuff in the community, but they do have a lot more control. Kind of as like the earliest player in this space.
I mean, from a layman's perspective, just looking at screen caps, I will say Decentraland at least looks cheery and pleasant to be in. Crypto Voxels looks like a Blade Runner nightmare of random bullshit. Like, I don't like the look of Crypto Voxels.
I personally just hate voxel art. I don't like Minecraft, just doesn't do it for me. I love how flexible it is.
Is voxel art built on blocks?
Yeah, voxels are...
What does voxel mean?
A voxel is a volumetric pixel. So, like...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
3D pixel. That makes sense.
A 3D pixel. And so that's what crypto voxels is. It's a pixel world, which means that they have... So Decentraland has really difficult builder tools, and you basically have to be one of these metaverse architect types to do anything really in Decentraland. Crypto Voxels has a more approachable voxel editor like Minecraft.
It's like snapping Legos together.
Yeah, exactly. Which means it's much more approachable, but it also means like, it's got
everything
a kind
has
of
that blocky look.
It's got kind of a weird look. And then the sandbox is also very similar to that. It's a voxel editor, but the thing with the sandbox is it's actually made by a game company. So the sandbox is a non-crypto game, not mobile game, I think, from like 2012. And they've been developing this voxel editor for the past 9 years. And they made a strategic decision to basically refactor the entire game into a crypto game. And now that's what the sandbox is. And it's getting a huge buzz. It's probably the most popular. They have a lot of deals with big brands like Atari and other giant companies, as well as a lot of crypto people like Artifact and Bored Apes and all that.
Yeah, it looks pretty.
Yeah, no, it's
given for voxel art, it's pretty.
It is.
Yeah,
it is the most advanced.
Okay,
I would say it's the most
out.
advanced crypto metaverse platform, and they are also. I'm not quite sure how open they're planning to be. They're very communicative about the open metaverse. It's like a big through line for their business. I'm not quite sure how all their wearables work or how they're planning to do that, but I know that the sandbox is very into it.
But scarcity is still part of it, right? Like you
Yes,
still have
land
to own.
scarcity. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm looking at a topographical, and it's like Atari owns this whole wing of the sandbox, and I see.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's still it. So those ones
Snoop Dogg
all
owns
operate.
some
Yeah,
land.
Snoop Dogg's. But they all operate under the same principle of you buy land, you develop on it, and you have this branded experience within the sandbox. Okay, so that's kind of like the city model, right? Okay, so if you think of the metaverse as just this planet or something, these are the places that are trying to become the New York cities or something in the metaverse. Okay.
Right.
The metaverse will not only be these platforms, but I think it's probably a decent bet that in this open metaverse ecosystem, this is going to be what happens, right? It's the same reason people go to World of Warcraft. There could network effects on these platforms. Brands can make their name known. It also means that they're kind of beholden to an organization, and if the organization does something they don't like I doubt Disney would ever be on Decentraland because they have no real control.
They wouldn't want to
it.
cede control to. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But Decentraland is also run by a DAO, and if you remember what that is, a decentralized autonomous organization, that means that it's actually run by a group that is not technically. They might be a corporation just based on how they set up originally. But what it means is that the governance of this corporate structure is all of the coin holders. And so that means if anyone owns mana that they use in the game to buy things, they also have voting rights for how the platform is run. And this is kind of the backbone of the player-owned metaverse or player-owned platforms that
And is your voting power ratioed to your buying power? Does that question make sense? Like,
Well,
can you vote more if you own more land?
Not land, but mana. So your voting power is directly tied to your plutocratic power.
Your investment into the system itself.
Yes, yeah. So, and it's the biggest, I think personally, it is the biggest weakness of crypto organizations. And also, I will say, one that pretty much all of them also seem to hate. This is a technological limitation at this point. And I didn't plan on doing this, but I feel the urge to take a nerdy detour here. So these DAOs are run by on-chain, meaning the blockchain is recording, on-chain voting, and each organization has its own rules on how this works. There's a lot of complicated game mechanics and things that these organizations are doing. It's actually really fun. I think it's super interesting. And you do things like you don't just vote based on how many coins you have. You actually have to put your coins into a pot called staking. And that could be for a month or 3 years or something. And based on that, you can increase your voting power. There are all sorts of different rules. But basically, the reason why this...
And I'm sorry, that represents... I'm just trying to tie everything to why human beings who are still flesh and blood, damn it, why are they doing this? So that's the idea that, well, if you're willing to freeze your funds for X amount of time, then you're committed to this idea.
Yeah,
so
it's
you
commitment.
Therefore deserve to vote on it.
Yeah, it's commitment voting.
Okay,
but
that makes
in
sense.
the end, it's still... If I have 10 mana and you have 20,000 mana, it's going to be super... where's the fairness there? I have to put my 10 mana up for 3 years to get a slightly higher value of voting, and you just throw 1,000, and there's no way I can compete with that, right?
And there's something inherently weird about that when we are both one human soul and one human body. Yeah.
And so then, this gets into very... deep philosophical territory. This all
touches on what should human life be.
Yeah. Is one person, one vote the ideal? Is direct democracy the ideal governance? Well, I don't know. Brexit happened.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. We have
Prop
to
8
argue
happened.
about that at length. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good question. But then how do you do it? Is it one person, one vote augmented by reputation? The blockchain can actually tie your actions to your online being, and then maybe your reputation augments your voting power rather than that. And for that to happen, you have to have proof of personhood or proof of humanity. And this is the big problem, because if MetaMask is the most popular crypto wallet, right? So that's where you put your Bitcoin and your Ethereum and all these different coins. And I'm just using MetaMask. It could be any wallet. But what you can do is if I have a rule where I say, okay, everyone in my DAO gets one vote, or there's this thing called quadratic voting or whatever, something tied to your identity. Everyone gets this vote. Okay, let's do a vote. And then I expect Michael to do one vote. I expect Griffin to do one vote. I expect everyone to have one vote. Well, ultimately what happens is, because it's tied to a coin in a wallet, if I have 10,000 coins, I can theoretically make 10,000 wallets and vote 10,000 times, right? And this is called a Sybil attack, and it's like the bane of crypto.
There's already a name for it. Sure,
oh no, well, it's a. I mean, these are older terms than just crypto.
Time-honored traditions of fucking with each other.
Yeah, and so you need proof of humanity, which is difficult. There are some services that are doing proof of humanity, but it's like a fucking hostage situation. You have to like stand in front of your webcam with a newspaper from today and your crypto wallet address and your name.
And then it has this, I know this is just a vibe thing because it is good to prove, but then it's like, to achieve openness, you need surveillance.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is,
and then
they seem antithetical to each other. Yeah,
right.
Weird.
Yeah, crypto is inherently anonymous, and then you're asking people to put into a centralized database their proof of life,
proof
basically.
That they are real.
Yeah.
So it's like, some 1984 shit where you're like, freedom is slavery.
Yeah. So then there are things like social graphs. And what that means is basically like your connections on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter all interact within this algorithm to say like, well, Michael does have a lot of online interactions. He's probably a human. And then you would get, your account, your qualifier based on those interactions. Now, what that means is you're tied to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, right? So like where are we escaping from these problems? So these are open problems, I would say. But anyways, Decentraland is a DAO. These are things that they have to deal with. But anyway, but the people who own the mana get to control it. People who own more mana get to control it more. It's not a fair system right now. It's not super democratic. But this is that detour was what people are thinking about to make these systems more fair. And hopefully that'll be something in the future. And one of the big hopes is like freedom of work, so that instead of working for a corporation, there are already crypto native people who kind of float between these DAOs doing various bits of work and getting bounties, basically. So you do some programming, you write an article, whatever they need, they'll pay you in either their cryptocurrency or their cryptocurrency and fiat, which is dollars, or whatever. So there are all sorts of different things. And this is it's just another flexible way for people to exist outside of the structures that so many are struggling to escape from these days.
This is neither here nor there, but why is it called fiat? Why don't they just call it dollars?
Well, fiat is just a term for the real world money.
But no, crypto is the term for the fake money. We already have a term for real money. It's the word money. Anyway, doesn't matter. I feel like a dinosaur for real right now.
Well, why?
Well, because I'm saying isn't dollars already the term for real actual money?
Well, fiat is any government issued money. But it's not. You're just
informing me of a word I don't know.
Yeah, fiat money is government money that's not backed by gold or any other kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of, dollars are already, well, I don't want to go down that road, but you could argue that dollars are already kind of They have the same
fictional
volatility
or a
as
construct.
Yeah, it's a fiction, but anyways.
Well, and then everything is because at one point we all just agreed this rock is called gold. This is the one that's worth money, which can be exchanged for goods and services. Like, what is anything? But we can't dig all the way down to that level.
Yeah. But these DAOs do have fiat money. A lot of them, if they get big enough, they build treasuries that start investing in diverse portfolios like a normal company or organization, right? So they might actually invest in yuan or dollars and Ethereum and all this stuff. So some of these have gotten pretty large, and it's super exciting. I think there's a lot of legal concerns around it. Wyoming was the first state to create legally recognized DAOs, and they were also the first state to create limited liability corporations. So they're on the frontier of like these legal fictions for organizations, and it just hasn't been tested. No one has sued a DAO and figured out like, oh, is this a thing, or does every person in this DAO actually share liability, and we're actually suing every single person, and they're going to have to foot the bill to pay whatever judgment. So there's some like,
and how would you enforce that and all this stuff?
Right. Yeah. Like, a lot of these people are pretty anonymous. I mean, I'm sure if the NSA or something wanted to get involved, they could track them down, but what kind of resources?
But it would take effort.
Right.
The people are trying to be anonymous.
Yeah. So we don't know. We don't know what's happening with that yet. But it's exciting. And Wyoming that was pretty bold. A lot of people don't like the Wyoming DAO because it actually kind of imposes some limitations.
I like that Wyoming's just like, we're the state that believes. We'll believe you. You say this new thing is real, we believe you.
Yeah.
Go for it.
But when someone sues them and a judge is like, I don't buy it. That's no good.
Then we'll see.
Yeah. So the DAOs ultimately, so right now where we are in this world is the DAOs have people running them still. So they're not really autonomous. You could argue they're no more decentralized than a public company. Like there are far more Google shareholders than there are Decentraland shareholders, right? But they also don't, the way that it develops is it's more like an open source community where there's no real management team and people are kind of elected to positions and they have responsibilities but can change jobs. And right now that still operates very much like a corporation because of this plutocratic voting where the people with the most coins have the most power. Eventually, the idea is to have people less and less involved in the operations of these organizations so that the smart contracts themselves, like the things written on the Ethereum blockchain, can automatically commit resources and assign people and disintermediate the operations so that no one has to trust each other.
As we've always done, we create more and more sophisticated tools and we hand the reins slowly over to those tools for anything that can be sort of automatically done, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so that's like the crypto side of things. It's very exciting, it's very new, and it's also not well adopted, and a lot of people don't trust it, right? Like especially
it's also not accessible. It seems to go out of its way. Like I never feel less well spoken or dumber than doing this podcast, and I love doing this podcast with you, but the crypto side of things especially feels like it's almost intentionally impenetrable.
It is, and you can see this in the design of these products too. The people who are making these early crypto products are not product people in many cases. They're the most extreme nerds who are excited about a new technology and they're learning how to use it and then like shoehorning it into stuff they think people will like. And most of the solutions are just wildly out of touch with what a normal human being would want to do.
Or like you're way overestimating my intelligence / commitment to learning how to do this new thing.
Like, I just told you,
yeah.
I just told you that in order to be in Decentraland, like, you have to understand, like, political theory, right? It's so,
right.
the burden
And staking
on,
and MetaMask. And I don't even know what the word fiat means. Like, what hope is there for me?
it's an incredible amount of information, and I think eventually it will probably become pretty commonplace. But you know, again, next episode we're going to talk more about this. But these are the burdens I think that are on all of us now. We have to and
it's cool. It's just cool to think this is like, you know, it's okay that I'm becoming older and losing touch, and not that you can't learn this stuff or come to understand it, or we wouldn't be doing this podcast. But this feels like the kind of thing that my grandchildren will be fluent in, and yet, you know, it takes a lot of effort for me to wrap my head around.
I would caution accepting that attitude. I really believe not just blockchain technologies, but just the sheer number of technologies that are advancing at a rate difficult to comprehend, like as a human, any human, means that we don't have the luxury of saying, oh, well, I'm a baby boomer. I work in a car factory and then I retire. Now the car factory you work in is actively being dismantled by other technologies as you're working. And in 2 years, you may not have a job anymore. And all of your skills
and
may
those
be
technologies
obsolete.
are being decentralized and disintermediated by other technologies that didn't exist last week.
Yeah.
It's like really happening quickly.
So I'll say it again next time probably, but that's my real intention for doing this. Is I hope anyone listening to this can take to heart that this is not a time to be like just laying down and saying, okay, well, interesting stuff happens. Like, we have to actively adapt and start to learn how to learn about these technologies. Because if you don't keep up, I really feel like in the next decade or two, the gaps are going to widen, and it will be difficult to close them if we don't start changing how we do things.
This was ARG specific, but we were talking on the phone the other day, and you described it as getting to the point where it will be almost like being a different species that has, like, you either have the constant perfect recall of all information humanity's ever assembled at your fingertips, or you don't. And that's a very big difference when it comes to navigating the world.
Yeah. You either are a superhuman or you're a monkey, right? Like, Free Guy. Yeah. It was a okay movie, but the message there was
you're a generous man, but sure. Interesting from the metaverse perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll talk about it more later.
Sure.
So there's also On Cyber. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. It's focused right now mainly on NFT galleries. They've got some cool stuff. You actually have to apply. There's no land scarcity. Anyone can start an NFT gallery, but you have to apply to be one of their artists to like make the gallery templates. And until this week, actually, I didn't really care that much about it. The idea of just having NFT galleries is kind of boring to me. I'm sure they have much bigger plans, but they did something, I think like yesterday or the day before, that blew me away, which was they made these portals. And a lot of platforms have portals, but they made these portals that show you the next world that you can walk into. And the load times between them, you don't walk into them until they're loaded, but you push E or whatever, and it starts to load, and it's only a couple seconds, as if you're like clicking on a hyperlink, right?
And well, it's like, did you see Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart? This was their big selling point.
Was walking between worlds? Or no load time?
It was a video game where the loading of the next level was so fast that you could literally shoot with your portal gun and like whip through the portal and be in a completely new environment with completely different graphics rendered.
Oh yeah. So it's very similar to that. It's not as fast as that. It's not a native client. This is running on a Chrome browser or something, right? But it's
That's
the first
insane.
it's the
Yeah.
first time I've seen actually walking through a portal and just seamlessly changing the world that you're in. And I thought I would mention it because it's an innovation that is one of my favorite things to think about. I think how portals exist and are shaped is going to be very difficult for people to deal with, because right now we have little
there's
text.
a famous axiom in game design I've learned since starting my new job, that doors are like one of the hardest things to design. Just the idea of separating one space from another, opening and closing a door, not getting stuck on the door as it opens or closes.
Uh-huh.
Portaling is very key to navigation and traversal.
Yeah.
This is neither here nor there, but real quick, just so I remember and so other people can check it out. You showed me an NFT project that is one of the few that struck me as, that's actually something that's kind of cool, where they all combine. When, like, if you own two of these, they
merge?
combine and genetically create a third one. And if you essentially someday, if someone can acquire the entire collection, they would all merge into just one thing.
Yeah.
What is that called so people can check it out?
Merge. It's by an artist called
it's called
Pack.
Merge. Okay.
And it was we had a spirited conversation about this. You didn't seem to be as into it.
I'm as people are, for the reasons that you've elucidated, I'm like, NFT, it must be some kind of scam. And I have since come around to being like, nah, this is pretty cool, actually.
Oh, okay.
I still don't think, in the same way that I look at a Jeff Koons piece and I go, yes, it has artistic merit. It doesn't mean it's worth $30 million, but so much of that is just a fabrication of the market or whatever. If you strip away how much the things are selling for, Merge is really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's $13,000 per unit.
Oh,
cool,
it's not.
But whatever.
I don't think it's that much right now. I think they sold like 280,000 of them or something. Or I don't know if actually what the gender of Pack is. They're a mystery. But Pack sold like 200 something thousand, I think, to like 30,000 people or something, and made, I think, like $91 million or something. And now over time, people will trade these merges and try to create the alpha merge, right?
So is that art good enough to be worth that money? That's neither here nor there, and it gave me sticker shock. But the thing itself is super cool.
Yeah, and
inarguably.
I'll actually just more context for it is the art itself is a circle. Like, they're just JPEGs of circles, and I personally think that this is an exciting part of NFTs and the promise of, or the possibilities of them, is it's not just art. It's not performance art, and it's not high art based on technical skill, like a technical artistic skill.
It's almost transactional art, or the art of shaping a transaction.
It's like,
what would you call it?
Yeah, it's using human psychology to shape values in ways that the artist can't even predict, and like looking at the emergent behaviors of crowds. Like it's a new and exciting thing, and it's all built on how cleverly you can design these smart contracts. And when you think about it in retrospect, it's like, well, why didn't anyone else do something that can merge two NFTs together before that? And it's like, well, just no one had. We're at that point right now where people are, it's just a playground. And someone like Pack, who has the clout to do something big like that, can generate $91 million in a day. I think it was 4 days, actually. But
okay, so yeah, I looked at. Well, they're not just circles, right? They're spheres, or are they just anyway? Because Pack does a bunch of stuff, and some of it looks pretty complex, like as little CG renderings of little objects.
Yeah, the cubes were the last big thing Pack did.
But Merge is just spheres, and they just.
I mean, the picture that I have in my wall, I have one of them. I don't have any more than that, but I bought one. It's just like a picture of a circle.
So then my question is, if you merge your JPEG of a black circle with a JPEG of a black circle, doesn't it just make another black circle?
It makes a slightly larger circle with mass 2.
Oh, it has a different mass.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, so eventually the alpha merge has like 270,000 mass or whatever.
1,000 mass. Okay,
And then,
gotcha.
I mean, just think of, so it was 91 to,
So even though Pack does create art and some of their NFTs are cool looking images, the Merge project is not necessarily striking visual art.
No.
The art is the transactional nature of what they're doing.
and the best part, the most exciting part is the merge. It's considered an art piece. So the merge art piece sold for $91 million to a bunch of different people, right?
Right.
I don't know how long it's going to take for this alpha merge to exist or if it ever will, but the amount of people energy that will go into that amount of trading to get 270,000 mass, like what will that translate into in terms of a dollar amount? Like what will that alpha merge mean? How much is the community worth? And like it's very difficult for me to
like someday there might be an article 7 years from now that says, oh, by the way, the alpha merge finally happened and it sold at auction for $1 billion.
I mean, like
that makes sense.
Or
and it's just a little circle.
And Pack will get, I don't know, I can't remember what the royalties are, but Pack will get 5% or 10% of every single transaction. So that's the power of NFTs too, is you can put in the smart contract, unlike a normal piece of art, which in Europe there are laws that are supposed to protect artists and give them commissions, royalties based on every sale, but it's never enforced. And so NFTs do that automatically, and that's I think one of the greatest utilities of the art NFTs is they give these people who are basically marginalized in most societies, and not everyone's getting super rich, but it really is giving.
I was like, not Pack is not marginalized no more.
No. Most people are not getting rich.
Right.
Yeah, people aren't selling out of their NFT projects with $91 million. It's ridiculous. But I have one, so I contributed.
Nice.
There's another big detour, but it's a big part of what's happening in the background. The non-crypto side of things is a little less mature and hyped right now. And like I said, a lot of it's older technology. So probably the granddaddy of the metaverse, I mean, is arguable, but Second Life has been around forever. I remember your dad playing it when we were when we were kids. And it has a lot of honestly, it has most of the same stuff that Decentraland has. It just doesn't use NFTs. Like you can still buy land in Second Life. You can do all this stuff, but it's just not on the blockchain. And a lot of people have criticism for Decentraland and these other platforms. So they're like, you're just doing what Second Life did 20 years ago and saying that you're some sort of technological wonder, when really, what's the difference? And I think that's a fair criticism, because in Second Life, if I sell you a piece of land in Second Life and then Linden Labs goes under, that's gone, right? You're not going to get that land back. In Decentraland,
but
what's that?
Isn't the same true of Decentraland? Like if the company went under and they ceased to exist, or like the sandbox could go away someday, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So you may own the land, you may own the hash on the blockchain, but if it's not tied to anything, then what does it matter, right? Like if I can't use it, then it's not really land. And so this is a personal preference. I think the land scarcity thing is an absolute, I was going to use a stronger word, but I think it's the wrong direction to go in. I don't think it will not lead to any mass adoption, right? It's only going to be accessible to people who can afford the land. And it ultimately just prevents people from doing the thing that all this stuff says it's meant for, which is, expressing creativity and bringing more of ourselves to our digital
Communication,
identities.
connection, yeah.
All the good stuff. It's really preventing a lot of that. And I mean, we know this, right? We live in Southern California, or I live in Southern California. Michael used to live in LA, lives in San Francisco now. Land is like one of the worst parts of being alive in the real world, right? Like landlords
Right, yes,
and
absolutely.
housing prices, it's insane. Even in Idaho or Montana right now, like everything has gotten so bad. Why would we recreate that in a limitless parallel universe? It's insane,
Right.
but it is how people raised money early on before all this hype existed, right? Meta didn't rename itself in 2017. How was a ragtag group of people supposed to create an online, virtual city? They did what they could think of, which was sell land.
Right.
So that's where we are. But Second Life, Philip Rosedale from the creator of Second Life, has really been a through line of this whole story. From Second Life, there was High Fidelity, which was another Philip Rosedale project. And I think they also did Sansar, which was sold and I think is defunct now as of like 2 weeks ago. But I think it might be floating around or something. But Philip Rosedale has done a lot of these projects. None of them have quite worked the way that you would want. Second Life is really interesting because it's so old and it has been updated over time, but it's just never gotten that like mass appeal that you would think it would be getting right now. And I know they're trying to revamp it again. And Philip Rosedale actually just came back as an advisor for them. But it's kind of a cautionary tale, right? Like, we're doing all this stuff, we're talking about all this stuff, but why hasn't anyone adopted it? And that is where I think, and I'm going to explicitly say, like, I am biased, and full disclosure, I am working on a startup based on these technologies. But this is where the web metaverse comes in. Second Life has a huge barrier to entry. And even though it seems small to most people listening to this, I'm sure, the fact that you have to download something and open that up every time you want to use Second Life, meaning a client, any native client, which is a big problem for Oculus Quest 2, it means that grandma can't go to it, really. It means that mom's probably not going to go to it. It means it's only in the realm of people invested in these experiences. And while that may be good for the cool club, it means that it can never really take on a life of its own because it's going to be insular and it's just going to be
like you said,
limited.
you can generate all this hype and you can have 13,000 people in this tiny room trading millions and millions of dollars around. But most people walking the face of the earth will still be like, well, there's that interesting thing over there that doesn't concern me happening over there.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be like, well,
how do you make that leap to where it's a normal course part of human life?
Yeah. Oh, okay. The techno wizards are off in their little party again. Okay. I'm just going to go about my day. Yeah. That's how it's been. And I mean, even when we were kids, your dad on Second Life, I was like, what is the point of this? And you guys just like walking around talking to each other. And I know it's much more complicated than that these days. Like, it has its own economy, but I
didn't know it was still, this is how, like, it hasn't caught on. I didn't know it still was active. I thought Second Life was defunct.
Oh, no. Yeah. I think they still have I want to say 1 million monthly users or something, which is like,
damn, well, not too shabby.
It sounds like a lot, but it's just not. I think like Facebook has 2 billion monthly users or something like that.
Sure.
I mean, it's like the scale of the things that we're talking about are
different orders of magnitude.
yeah, many orders of magnitude. But yeah, so that's where we are. We got these web-based solutions now, and none of them are quite mature yet. The first, so there's a lineage here, starting with, I think one of the most important is actually this thing called Janus VR, which was a VR only native client metaverse kind of experience thing from like the mid 20 teens. But this guy, James Biacono, he's basically just been a one man kind of like a Merlin toiling in his tower for the past decade. And he actually just used Janus and made a web client for it, like just independently. And he was walking around in their world for a month or so until they finally figured out what was happening and they offered him a job. So then he actually started making a web client for the platform.
Wow.
The company could not monetize anything. It was basically a social spatial web experience. So spatial web is just it's the metaverse with old terminology. So 3D website, and it just never. No one wanted to pay money for it. I think it was clunky. It was older technology. It was VR only in a time when no one had VR. So it just didn't work out. But what happened was the Janus company open sourced the Janus code, and James Biacono is still maintaining that code. And I mean, it may be bold to say this, but I basically think that work has spawned. Like it may be that spawns the ultimate solution to what this metaverse stuff is, because the Mozilla, so
like this guy might be remembered as
like
the founding father of this shit.
He's someone that like there might be a statue of in the metaverse somewhere, like the virtual the metaverse Louvre statuary garden, and he'll be looking at Philip Rosedale or something across the courtyard. But it's really cool because basically this community is still super small, and all paths lead from Janus. Like all of these builders are, they start at Janus, and I feel lucky that I ran into those guys. But Janus had a specific purpose and was built on technology, many years ago, in a time where technology moves incredibly quickly. And so I think personally, and like I don't want to do a sales pitch for this, but I think personally, and I'm now personally invested.
You're not just a spokesman, you're a member.
Yeah. This thing called XR Engine, it is an open source, like end-to-end metaverse creation engine. It's basically a game engine for the web. So it's right now it's the only thing that I know of that's mature, that's not based on Unity pretty much. And one of the big, kind of going back to an earlier comment, one of the big issues with all of these platforms, Decentraland, OnCyber, Spatial.io is another one, CryptoVoxels, all the stuff built on Unity, Unity's license will not let you double white label something. So while you may not know that Spatial.io is built on Unity, you think maybe it has its own game engine that they've created, they cannot then turn around and sell you a website that you can host on your own domain. So you couldn't have michaelswaim.com.
Okay.
Through
I'm slowly
Spatial.
understanding what double white label means. So you're saying they can give me permission, but I am not bestowed with the ability to give permission.
Right.
By that permission. Right.
And so,
which you need for the whole thing to work. Otherwise you can't create a connected web of stuff.
Right. And so the ultimate problem is that where will Disney go to host their metaverse? They're going to use their own domains. Where are all these brands going to go? Honestly, even the crypto brands, where will they want to go? Are they only going to want to exist within Decentraland or the Sandbox or something, or will they want their own headquarters somewhere that's not connected to these other platforms? And right now, like without this XR,
what is the engine upon which that is built?
Yeah. And that's it's just about mature, and that's kind of what my new project is with the team who made that. They've been working for a couple years building it through a consultancy, but it's all open source, and the idea is that very much like a WordPress, but for the spatial web. It's crypto optional, which I also think is important, because while I believe the NFT technology will increase the capabilities of all of these, digital ownership paradigms and everything, it's not widely adopted yet, right?
It's not a DAO, or you're not having. It doesn't involve labyrinthine voting.
No,
over.
And that's actually because I was this is just what my labyrinthine path through this whole world is. I came across Janus, and I was actually talking to James Bayakino about revamping the Janus engine, and was really just about to start that. And I still kind of regret that I didn't, because I really like him and I think it would have been cool to do. But I saw this XR engine and I was like, oh, I'm already beaten. they're 2 years ahead. They've gone in a really great direction. So, watch out for this. Check it out. I think it's really exciting. The documentation's not the best yet because they're still developing it. But if you are interested in getting involved in like open source metaverse creation, I'm basically giving you like, I'm giving you the secrets to the things you can go check out. And I want to put a couple links in the show notes.
Oh, yeah, send them along. We'll definitely include them. Does it stand for extreme reality?
Oh, no. XR is actually its term for it's cross reality. So it basically means augmented reality.
I was close.
Or virtual reality. So it's XR instead of AR.
Both.
Yeah.
I see.
And so this was born, I kind of skipped ahead a little bit. Janus was kind of a revolution in that sense. And then Mozilla, the people who make Firefox, right?
Mm-hmm.
They actually created a standard called WebXR. And that's kind of like the mainstream that has built all these tools. So there's XR Engine, there's Mozilla Hubs, there's A-Frame. There are like a couple solutions. I don't think anyone's as complete as XR Engine, but this all stems from Mozilla. I think I don't want to say that they copied James Bayakino's homework, but I kind of believe that they did probably. And that's the world we're living in. And, with all the new headsets, augmented reality headsets and everything that are, going to be web enabled, this is, the next year or two is going to be a very exciting time for all this.
Yeah. So, just to track the narrative of this little mini series so far, we're basically seeing the story of a bunch of different convergent technologies, web technologies, the art world. It's so interesting because it impacts politics, like we've discussed, voting regulations and the SEC's involved, but it's also fully an art thing and a marketing thing and a video game thing. And you tie it all together with all these new technologies, and you wrap that all up. And what we're driving at is this universe where you can just log on to the web as seamlessly as you today log on to the internet and
do whatever you want
using an engine, right? And create these worlds to share, to interact. So next episode, I gather, we'll be talking about, okay, so let's say we get there, we have our XR engine and we've made it accessible, right? Mm-hmm. And even grandma can go, let's say grandpa, it doesn't have to always be gendered in that way. So even grandpa can go and fuck around and make his little world and be like, I understand the metaverse, it's cool. How do you connect them all together? And that's a whole episode unto itself.
And it will have
right?
no solutions, but I'll be able to say all the problems that need to get solved.
Okay, great. Because that's the dream that we laid out with things like Snow Crash. The dream is a completely seamless, interconnected one of these that we're describing, right? That's the dream.
Yeah, and I think that's what has kind of gotten lost in translation, I think, is a lot of people look at these platforms like Horizons or Decentraland or the Sandbox or any of them, and they say, oh, well, they're trying to make the metaverse. And it's like, no, there is no way that's possible. Even Mark Zuckerberg will say that. The metaverse is the seamless interconnection and interoperability with content portability between those worlds. That's the open metaverse, at least. And it has a myriad of problems that will be very difficult to actually get through in an episode, but it will present where we are and what needs to happen for this parallel reality enabling superhumanity to exist. So that'll be next time.
Next time on Science or Whatever. Thank you, Griffin.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know why we thank each other at the end. Tell people where they can find you if they want to follow you online.
My Twitter is Griffosaurus. I'm not super active on it, but I would be happy if anyone's interested to provide any content or get more active. You can always just DM me too. I love talking about this. I spend all day doing it. We can put in the show notes too, probably. But
yeah, I was gonna say, or check out the show notes, patreon.com/smallbeans, and we'll have all kinds of additional links and material that Griffin will provide.
Yeah, get in touch. I'd love to get more and more people involved.
All right, till next time. This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!